The next key thing we're going to understand in terms of the world of hair color is if we have a look at natural hair color, anybody that wants to lighten their hair up or go lighter will throw a certain underlying pigment. And what that means for us is the darker levels throw more of a certain underlying pigment, and as we gradually get lighter, those underlying pigments change. And as a colorist, that gives us an indication in terms of what level we're at. So for us, if we relate that straight back to the color wheel, your darker levels will throw more red. As you start getting lighter, that hair starts throwing a little bit more red-orange, then into yellow-orange, and then into yellow. So if you imagine a blonde, when we lighten that blonde person up from a darker level up to the lightest level that we can, their hair is going to throw a lot of yellow. And that's where the whole understanding of knowing what those underlying pigments is all about gives us that ability to either utilize or neutralize that underlying pigment to create the final result that we're looking at. How we lift and lighten hair color is based purely on the activators that we choose to use. Now, you would have heard in the world of hairdressing, activators either being in volume or in percent. So you have a 10 vol, a 20 vol, a 30 vol, or a 40 vol, or a 3%, 6%, 9%, or 12%. Technically, they're exactly the same. What they give us an indication of is the amount of oxygen that is present in the activator, which is responsible for lifting or lightening the natural hair up.
And how do you lighten hair?
When we lighten hair, it's that chemical reaction that the products we use have on the natural hair pigment. So if we take a 10 vol, for example, if I take the 10 and I ditch the 0, what am I left with?
1.
10 vol will in essence give us 1 level of lift. So to achieve 2 levels of lift, which volume are we going to choose to use?
20.
20 vol will always give you up to 2 levels of lift in O&M. So if your client is on a natural level 6 and they want to get to a level 8, it's 2 levels of lift. So therefore, we're going to use the 20 volume to achieve those 2 levels of lift. It's a controlled lift and it becomes predictable. If you were looking for 3 levels of lift, what volume would you choose to use?
30.
And that's where the beauty comes in terms of becoming predictable in terms of color results. So understanding what we have to work with and where we ultimately want to go is really key for us as a colorist, and that all forms part of a consultation which we'll cover off in another module. But understanding right now that if we have a look at our leveling system and what associated underlying pigment we have in O&M, remember we worked on the ICCC, the International Color Classification Code. 2 for us is black, and we see black as having a blue underlying pigment. Sounds a little weird, but if you imagine somebody that's got really dark hair, almost black, sometimes we refer to that client as having a blue-black color, and that in essence is where we see that underlying pigment sitting at a level 2. When we move into levels 3 and 4, there we have more of a red underlying pigment. At level 5, we have a red-orange. At level 6, we have an orange-red. At level 7, we're dealing with orange. 8 is a yellow-orange, 9 is a yellow, and 10 is a pale yellow. Now, the easiest way for me to distinguish between what the 2 yellows are is if you relate it to food. Think of a lemon. It's quite a bright, intense yellow. That's indicative of a level 9. Where you move to a level 10, it's a softer yellow. So imagine an inside of a banana. That is a level 10. So when we understand what those underlying pigments are, if we were going from a level 6 to a level 8, we know that at level 8 it's going to throw a yellow-orange. The only 2 options I have as a colorist to deal with the yellow-orange is to utilize that yellow-orange and create a beautiful golden copper reflect, or neutralize the yellow-orange with a blue-violet because it sits directly opposite, and create a beautiful natural tone.
Would any of those colors make a gray?
A gray?
Yeah.
To create a gray, it's one of those really on-trend fashion tones at the moment. To create a gray, we need to pre-lighten that client's hair right up to level 10, which is that pale yellow. We then need to counteract that pale yellow to give us a really clean canvas, because if you have a look at it, gray is basically a diluted or a pasteurized version of blue. The last thing we want to do is mix blue and yellow together, because what is that going to give us?
Green.
It's going to create green, and it does it every single time, because the world of color, those principles for us are so important, because if you don't get rid of the yellow and you put a pastelized blue on yellow, as you mentioned, you're going to create a
Green.
To overcome the green from coming through, get to the yellow, counteract the yellow with a violet to create a perfect clean canvas, and then do an overlay of something that is a pastelized blue that'll give you that perfect grey every time.